James Carter, a successful black CEO who walked into Ashton National Bank on an ordinary Monday morning. He wasn't loud, he wasn't reckless. He was just there to deposit a business check worth more than most people's annual salary. But the moment he handed it over, the room shifted. Whispers, side glances. And then the bank manager, Richard Bennett, a smug man in a tailored suit, took the check, stared at James with contempt, and in front of a lobby full of people, shredded it. The message was clear. You don't belong here. Not with that skin, not with that money, not in this space. Customers gasped. Phones started recording. The humiliation was sharp, deliberate, a public reminder of how racism weaponizes power to strip dignity. What Bennett never imagined, though, was that the man he tried to humiliate was no ordinary customer. James Carter had built an empire, and within minutes, he would turn that bank and the entire building upside down. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our powerful stories. And don't forget to share this one, because silence only protects the corrupt. And this story deserves to be heard. Now let's get into it. The lobby of Ashton National Bank was busy that Monday morning. Polished marble floors, the sound of printers humming, and the low chatter of customers waiting in line. At the center of it all stood James Carter, a tall black man in his early 40s, calm and confident. Dressed simply in jeans, a hoodie, and clean sneakers, he didn't look like the millionaire CEO he was. To everyone else, he was just another face in the crowd. James handed his business check across the counter, an amount large enough to make heads turn. The teller froze, her eyes widening. She stammered, "1 moment, sir," before quickly disappearing into the manager's office. Moments later, the manager himself appeared. Richard Bennett, sharp navy suit, slicked back hair, smug smile plastered across his face. He held the check between 2 fingers as though it were dirty. His eyes flicked over James, scanning him up and down with thinly veiled disdain. "You expect us to cash this?" Richard asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Men like you don't walk in here with checks like this. This has scam written all over it." The room grew still. Customers turned. A few whispered. A teenager lifted his phone, recording discreetly. James stood tall, his voice calm. "That check is legitimate. Run it and you'll see." But Richard didn't even look at the machines. Instead, he walked to the corner of the counter where a shredder sat humming. Slowly, with deliberate cruelty, he fed the check into the blades. The hiss filled the room. White confetti fluttered to the ground like ashes, erasing James's dignity piece by piece. Gasps echoed. A woman covered her mouth. Someone muttered, "Did he just—" Richard smirked, leaning closer. "Maybe next time try a pawn shop. Because here, you don't belong." James's jaw tightened, fury simmering behind his calm gaze. He didn't move, didn't shout, didn't break. But in that silence, a storm was building. One Richard Bennett could never have predicted, and James Carter was, about to turn the entire bank upside down. The shredded paper still fluttered across the polished floor when the room finally found its voice. A ripple of gasps, a few nervous laughs, and then silence again. Every pair of eyes was on James Carter, waiting for him to explode, to fight, to prove the stereotype they were already whispering about. Richard Bennett leaned against the counter, adjusting his silk tie like a man who had just won. His words dripped with contempt. "This is a respectable bank, not some back-alley operation. A check that big, coming from a black man in a hoodie? Please." The word black hung heavy in the air, twisted into an insult. A middle-aged couple in line nodded subtly, as if Richard had said what they were thinking but didn't dare speak out loud. James stood still, his shoulders squared, his calm cutting sharper than any outburst. "That check was issued by one of your own partner institutions. You destroyed it without cause." Richard smirked, lowering his voice just enough to make it sting. "What I destroyed was a scam. Face it. Men like you don't walk in here with millions, and when you try, you get caught." The teenager with the phone shifted, angling for a better shot. A woman near the door muttered, "He didn't even scan it." Another customer whispered back, "Doesn't matter. You saw what color he is. That's all the manager needed to see." James heard every word, but his face remained unreadable. Instead of raising his voice, he reached calmly into his pocket and pulled out his phone. One thumbprint, one tap, and a message was sent. Richard scoffed. What's the matter? Calling your buddies? Or maybe your lawyer? Doesn't matter. Nobody's saving you here. James slipped his phone back into his pocket, his eyes never leaving Richard's smug grin. The calm in his voice sent a chill through the lobby. You're right about one thing, Richard. Nobody's saving me. I don't need saving. The doors at the far end of the lobby suddenly swung open, the sharp click of heels echoing across the marble floor. Heads turned. Employees stiffened. Something was shifting. Because James Carter hadn't called a lawyer. He had just called in the kind of backup Richard Bennett would never see coming. The heavy glass doors swung shut behind the woman in heels. Clara Whitfield, the bank's regional director, swept across the lobby with an entourage of 2 suited executives and a uniformed security guard. Her sharp navy dress and pearl necklace screamed authority, and the employees straightened instantly. Richard Bennett lit up, strutting toward her like a king greeting his queen. Perfect timing, Ms. Whitfield, he said loudly, waving his hand toward James. We've got ourselves a situation. This man tried to pass a fraudulent check. Clara's gaze swept over the shredded paper on the floor, then landed on James. Her lips tightened. Is that true? James didn't flinch. That check was legitimate. He destroyed it without even verifying. Richard chuckled, his voice dripping with arrogance. Look at him. A black man in street clothes walking in here with millions? You and I both know what that looks like. The word hung in the air again, black, spoken like a crime in itself. A few customers exchanged glances, some nodding, others looking away uncomfortably. The security guard shifted closer to James, hand resting on his belt. Clara's eyes stayed cold. Mr. Carter, perhaps you don't understand how our institutions operate. Large transactions require credibility, proof of stability, something you clearly don't have. James's jaw tightened, but his voice was calm, steady. What I have is more than enough. What you've shown me is exactly what I expected. Richard smirked, leaning in so close James could smell his cologne. You people always think money makes you equal. But at the end of the day, you're just another black man trying to play rich. And in my bank, that doesn't fly. Gasps rippled through the lobby. Phones tilted higher. The teenager recording mouthed, "Did he just say that?" For a moment, silence fell, thick, suffocating, charged with tension. James stood tall, eyes locked on Richard's smug grin. He didn't shout. He didn't break. Instead, he glanced toward the doors where the sound of polished shoes clicking against marble grew louder. The crowd turned. Another group of people was entering, their presence commanding, their faces familiar to some. And the moment Richard saw who they were, the blood drained from his face. The click of polished shoes grew louder as 3 men and a woman entered the bank lobby. They wore tailored suits, their badges clipped neatly to their lapels. A hush fell over the room as the group strode in with authority, their eyes scanning the scene before locking on James. Richard Bennett straightened nervously, his smirk faltering but not yet gone. He barked out quickly, trying to get ahead of it. Don't worry, folks. Just in time. This man here... He jabbed a finger toward James, his voice rising. Tried to pass off a fake check. I shredded it on the spot. Typical scam. These black hustlers always find new tricks. The word black cut through the lobby like a blade, spat out like filth. Several customers winced. A mother shook her head in disgust. Not at James, but at the open hate dripping from Richard's mouth. James stood motionless, his calm unshaken, but inside, the storm built hotter. One of the suited men, tall, broad-shouldered, his voice steady, spoke up. Mr. Carter, are you all right? The crowd stirred. Customers glanced at each other. Mr. Carter? The respect in that voice didn't match the man Richard had been ridiculing. Richard's face twitched. He let out a laugh, brittle at the edges. Oh, don't be fooled by the act. You know how they are. Loud claims, no proof. Just another black man trying to play executive with stolen paper. Gasps rose again. Phones lifted higher, cameras capturing every venomous word. Even Clara Whitfield shifted uncomfortably now, though she stayed silent, weighing her loyalties. James finally spoke, his tone calm, sharp enough to silence the room. "Careful, Richard. You've already buried yourself deeper than you realize." The suited woman stepped forward, her badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. "This is James Carter, CEO of Carter Global Holdings." "The man whose name is on half the accounts you manage in this branch?" Richard froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face as murmurs rippled through the crowd. The teenager's phone shook in his hand. "Oh my God," he whispered. "He's the boss." Richard stumbled back, his arrogance crumbling. But the humiliation wasn't over, because James Carter wasn't just a client. He was about to show everyone in that lobby exactly who owned the ground they were standing on. The lobby buzzed with murmurs, the tension electric. Phones tilted higher, capturing every second. Customers who had whispered doubt minutes ago now stared in shock at James, their eyes wide. Richard Bennett staggered back, his smug mask slipping like wet paint. "CEO?" he stammered, his voice cracking. "That's impossible. Look at him. He walks in here dressed like some street kid." His voice rose, desperate, laced with the same venom he had used all morning. "You can't expect me to believe a black man in sneakers and a hoodie owns anything like that?" The word black slammed into the lobby again, this time not with power but with fear. The crowd gasped. Someone whispered, "He really just said that out loud?" James took a slow step forward, his presence calm but commanding. His voice carried like iron wrapped in velvet. "The problem, Richard, isn't the color of my hoodie. It's the color of my skin, and the fact that it terrifies you to see success in it." Richard's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The weight of every eye in the room pressed down on him. The suited woman from James's team pulled a folder from her briefcase, slapping it onto the counter with deliberate force. "Here are the ownership documents. Carter Global Holdings owns this property. The entire building you're standing in. Every square foot. Every office. Every key." The words dropped like thunder. Gasps erupted. Phones buzzed as live streams spread. A man near the back muttered, "He doesn't just have an account here. He owns the bank's building?" Richard's face drained of color. Clara Whitfield swallowed hard, her pearl necklace trembling as her chest rose and fell. Even the security guard took a cautious step back, suddenly unsure of where his loyalties belonged. James's eyes never left Richard's. "You shredded my check in front of the world. Now let's see how the world feels when it sees you shredded with the truth." The teenager with the phone whispered to the live stream, "Oh man, this is about to go viral." James turned slightly toward his team, his expression unreadable. "Bring in the documents," he said calmly, and as the glass doors swung open again, a group of lawyers in tailored suits marched in carrying boxes, proof that the entire game had just changed. The glass doors thudded shut as the lawyers entered, their leather briefcases heavy with documents. They spread across the marble floor like storm clouds, placing files and binders onto the counter. The energy in the lobby shifted. No longer a bank manager humiliating a customer, but a man on trial before the public. James Carter stood tall, still in his hoodie and sneakers, but now the weight of his empire was behind him. He spoke evenly, his voice steady as a drumbeat. "For years, Carter Global Holdings has done business with this bank. Millions have flowed through these walls. And yet today, because I'm a black man who doesn't look like your idea of wealth, you decided I was a fraud." The word black echoed off the marble. No longer a weapon from Richard, but a truth spoken with fire. Customers shifted, guilt flickering across some faces. The teenager's live stream chat exploded with comments. "This is insane. Racism caught in 4K. He owns the place." Richard tried to bark back, his face slick with sweat. "This is ridiculous." He's twisting the story. One of James's lawyers opened a binder and slid it across the counter. "Here are the audit records. Dozens of times, Mr. Bennett has delayed, rejected, or shredded transactions from black-owned businesses while pushing through less credible checks from white clients." Gasps shot through the room. A woman near the front muttered, "I knew it. My cousin had his loan denied here for no reason." Richard's voice cracked. "This is out of context." "These people," he stopped himself too late. "These people." The crowd erupted in whispers, disgust lacing their words. Clara Whitfield's face paled as she skimmed the documents, realizing the evidence was airtight. Still, her lips stayed sealed, survival instincts locking her silence. James leaned closer to Richard, his calm like a blade pressed against skin. "You didn't just try to humiliate me. You've been doing this for years. To families, to business owners, to anyone who looked like me." The security guard stepped back fully now, crossing his arms, no longer shielding Richard. Customers pressed closer, phones held high, capturing every detail. And just when Richard thought it couldn't get worse, one of James's lawyers pulled out a small hard drive and placed it on the counter. "This," the lawyer said, "is the video proof. Every denial. Every word. Every shred." The hard drive sat on the counter like a loaded weapon. The crowd pressed closer, breathless, phones raised high. Richard Bennett's face went pale, his eyes darting to Clara Whitfield as if begging her to intervene. She stayed frozen, her pearl necklace trembling as her fingers twisted together. One of James's lawyers slid a sleek laptop forward, connecting the drive with a soft click. Within seconds, the screen lit up, and Richard's own voice filled the lobby. "Decline that one? Too risky. Another black applicant? Deny it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The next clip followed, his tone smug and cruel. "Look at this check. A black man with this much money? Must be fake." Shred it. Phones shook in people's hands. Murmurs turned to outrage. A woman near the back shouted, "That was my brother's loan. You laughed at him." Another customer, fists clenched, growled, "I knew you were dirty, Bennett." Richard's face flushed deep red. This is being taken out of context." It was about fraud risk. James raised his hand, silencing the room with nothing more than calm authority. "Fraud risk isn't the color of a check. Fraud risk isn't the color of a man's skin. But for you, Richard, it always was." The next clip played, Richard's drunken voice captured during an after-hours call. "The board will never notice if we toss a few more black checks. They don't belong in our bank anyway." The crowd erupted. Customers booed, some shouting for his firing, others for his arrest. Even the security guard stepped forward now, unclipping his radio, his jaw set. Richard spun in desperation, pointing at James. "He set me up. He's twisting everything. He's just another black hustler playing victim," but his words only dug his grave deeper. Gasps and boos swallowed him whole. Livestream comments poured in faster than the teenager could read them. "Caught in 4K. Shut him down. James Carter is a king." James didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words carried louder than any shout. "Richard, you shredded my check to humiliate me. But what you really shredded was your own career." The last clip echoed in the lobby, Richard sneering, "They should stick to pawn shops. That's where black money belongs." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, from the back of the room, a police siren wailed outside, red and blue lights flashing through the glass. The red and blue lights washed across the polished marble, flashing against stunned faces. The glass doors swung open, and two uniformed officers entered, their radios crackling. The crowd parted, phones still raised, documenting every second. Richard Bennett's voice broke into a frantic shout. "Officers, arrest him! He's causing a disturbance. He's lying!" His finger jabbed wildly toward James, sweat dripping down his temple. But the officers ignored him. One of James's lawyers stepped forward, handing them a thick folder and pointing toward the laptop still playing Richard's own words. The officer's eyes darkened as the clips echoed through the lobby. "Decline that one. Another black applicant? Deny it. You should have gone to a pawn shop. Black money doesn't belong here." The officers turned to Richard, their expressions stone. "Mr. Bennett, you're under investigation for discrimination, fraud, and destruction of financial documents. You'll need to come with us." The crowd erupted, some clapping, some shouting for justice. Phones shook as live streams poured the scene across the internet. Richard's protests were drowned in noise as the officers cuffed him and led him out the door, his face twisted with fear. Clara Whitfield stood frozen, her authority shattered. James Carter finally stepped forward, his calm voice filling the silence. "This is what happens when power is poisoned by prejudice," he said, his eyes sweeping across the room. You tried to humiliate me because I'm a black man who didn't fit your picture of wealth. But wealth isn't skin deep. Respect isn't skin deep. Humanity isn't skin deep. Remember that. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling, echoing against the marble walls. The teenager with the live stream whispered into his phone. The whole world just saw justice served. James adjusted his hoodie, looked around one final time, then walked toward the doors with his team at his side. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to stay. The truth had already spoken louder than anything Richard could ever say again. As the cameras followed him into the morning light, James Carter left the bank not as a victim, but as a symbol of resilience and power. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because silence protects the corrupt, but your voice can expose them. The fight isn't over. It's only just begun.